Welcome to Ideas Live. I'm Anne-Marie Oomen, and this is my co-host,
Karen Anderson.
and we are here today in our show that explores deep conversation with a particular person about a particular topic. And our topic today is aging.
How eagerly we approach it.
That's right.
The topic, that is.
That's right. It's a topic that's been on our minds for a while, and we've been thinking about it, and we had a little trouble finding someone who was actually willing to talk about it. And so my first reaction, of course, was, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing aging. It's not on my radar, and yet, as is clear, it's happening. It's happening to so many of us. 73% of us will be over the age of 65 between 2010 and 2030, meaning 1 in 5 Americans will be a senior. And that's the boomer generation really moving into our aging years. And I think that that's something to be examined as a cultural force, but it's also a personal thing.
It's also possible that those percentages could already exist in our region because it's such a popular place for retirees.
That's very true.
Sometimes it seems already that there are a vast number of older people, among whom I must count myself.
Yes,
I'm not just a spectator.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So there are many of us grappling with the same things. And so just out of curiosity, I looked up the definition for aging, and these are some of the things that I found. Aging has been defined as the collection of changes that render human beings progressively more likely to die.
So, with that bright thought,
I know.
What an appalling definition. Would you just take that off your list?
Right. Please? And then the second one, the term aging can refer to the biological process of growing older in a deleterious sense. And I was like starting to think, this is just not the approach I wanted to take. And then I found this one. Aging can also simply refer to the passage of time and can even have a positive connotation, as in aging wine. So I liked that one better.
Age to perfection.
Right. And I think, in all honesty, the last definition that I found was aging is the most complex biological process because it involves many levels of physical and emotional health. And that felt to me like,
it's more accurate.
That's a real reflection of what aging is like. There are all these changes happening, and the culture perceives us, those of us who are aging, as sort of set. And then, there's things are happening, people are in decline, but when I was young, I was certainly looking at aged people as not much was happening. When in fact, there's an immense amount happening. And
well, our whole attitude toward aging, though, I think has changed as a society.
Yes.
And people were regarded as old much sooner than they are now, too, because of some of those attitudinal shifts. But you're right, I never thought much about, my grandparents were just old. I didn't think about how old. I wasn't curious about what that meant, because especially as a very young person, you're completely centered on your own world. I wish now I'd had some of those conversations with them.
And I, even though my grandparents were very present in my life, I wish I'd said things like, what is this like
What's
for
it
you?
like?
Yeah, it was almost taboo.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember so clearly was my grandmother never complained about being old. Never. I never heard her talk about aches and pains or.
Isn't that amazing?
She was kind of, and I admire that now. Not that she was in denial or stoic, but I think she was very clear she did not want to burden the family. And after her husband died and she lived alone, she took very good care of herself so she wouldn't become a burden. And so in some ways I kind of admire the fact that she lived with dignity and some restraint about her situation.
But there's also that whole idea of golden years, and we think about golden years, but I I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue that, you know, what that golden was sort of beautiful and also challenging. I had no idea what the challenges were. And I think I know now, but it's a revelation that comes slowly. And I think that living well, what you just said, living well, is a part of aging that personally I need to explore.
However you define that. And I think each person has to define what they want their later years to look like.
Yeah. I've run into many people who are well into their aging process where they're discussing their ailments has become their current entertainment.
I know.
Which
Not a good thing.
I think there's some big risks
I've
there.
also heard of groups of older people who make it a rule to not discuss illness or grandchildren.
Right.
When we get together, we're going to talk about other things, you know, if there are indeed other things.
That's a great idea. So I thought that to have, to discuss a little bit more about aging in a positive way, that aging as fine wine, and also to think about the more realistic aspects of, yes, aging is bringing us closer to this moment when we transcend or leave or whatever you want to call it, when we die. So who would know about those things and be willing to talk about them?
And you found her.
I found her. So we will be right back with our guest. Welcome back to Ideas Live. I'm Anne-Marie Oomen. This is my co-host,
Karen Anderson.
and today we have as our guest Barbara Goodearl, and we are talking about our deep conversation topic this time is aging, and we've had a lot of questions rise about it. I want to introduce Barbara, though. She has been and her bio is very interesting because she defies age in many ways. She has been a teacher, a mother of 3 of her own and 3 stepchildren. Is that correct? And a singer, an organist, a pianist, a photographer, a gym member working out 3 times a week, a walker. You did a half marathon 5 years ago, an avid reader, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a hospice volunteer, and she founded her own business in 2004, which is Just Like Family. And Just Like Family, you are a group of caregivers who go into the home. You can probably explain that better, but you are constantly working with aging.
Right. Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about Just Like Family, how that came to you and what that is and how that relates to the aging process?
Well, my husband and I were volunteers at our hospice house here, and the nurses saw the kind of care I was able to give to the people who were dying and their families, and so they had a case that this lady was in the hospital, she was dying. The daughter did not want her to be in the hospital or in hospice house. She wanted her to be home. So the nurses asked if I would go and be with her at her home with the daughter, which I did, and I stayed there for 2 days and took care of her mother and guided the family through the process and made sure she was medicated and clean, and it was a beautiful death, as they all are. The minister was there with his wife singing. They all sang to her, and it was just lovely. So that's how I started. And then other people wanted me to do the same thing, and there was just one of me. So I asked nurses from hospice and friends and other caregivers, and we formed this team and this business, went to SCORE and learned how to do a business, became an LLC. So now we take care of not only hospice cases, but people who are aging and just need some help at home to stay home. And we also do post-surgeries and things like that, and just companions take me out and take me to the grocery store. You know.
So it isn't just about dying.
It's not just about dying. It's giving quality to what they have now and improving their freedom and their ability to get out and do things instead of just staying home and
Yeah. Yeah. You have a particularly, and maybe it is because you have attended so many deaths, but you have a particularly positive attitude about this aging, this process of aging.
And even dying.
And dying, right, right.
Well, it's a miracle. You know, we prepare for the baby's birth, and we have parties and showers, and the family gets together, and it's a big event. And when it comes to death, families kind of don't want to talk about it. They don't want to face it, but it's going to happen, and it's just as much a miracle as baby's birth.
How did you come to that attitude? Where does that come in your thinking?
From seeing so many beautiful deaths.
Really?
Every death has been beautiful. And when my husband died, he was in a coma, but he laughed hysterically the last day. He was laughing. He was, you know, his eyes were closed. We couldn't communicate, but he was so happy. And I thought, gosh, that's just wonderful.
Sounds like you have taken the fear out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have all sorts of fears about being in pain, or what comes next, or I won't know what to do, those of us on the outside. And so even for ourselves, I mean, there's a good deal of fear. And when I hear you talk about it, the fear seems to be gone, and there's a comfort.
Gone.
I find that really reassuring.
Yeah, I think we need to picture our last days. I do sometimes. I wonder how I'm going to die and what it's going to be like, but I know it's going to be beautiful, and I know my family will be with me, and I know that I'll be seeing Dan again and my parents, and it is a beautiful thing, and there's no reason for it not to be beautiful. So
I think that's part of the problem, is that culturally there's so much negativity about it. You know, it's such an ending. We don't perceive it always as a
It is an
beginning.
ending. Yes, you can't escape that.
And a lot of families don't bring it up or talk about it. In my family, well, I have a final file box at home in my closet, and the kids know where it is, and it has everything they need to know. I wrote my obituary. I have the pictures I want at the funeral home. I have everything in it, financial stuff, lawyer stuff, the deed to the house, the car, everything is in there. The music I want at the funeral, who I want to do it, and it gives you an empowerment to know that this is done. They don't have to worry about it, and it's all there.
And it's not just about that when you die, they don't have to worry about it. It's also the process that you go through of accepting that as you shape the materials in this box.
The accepting part.
And my children and I have talked about this. That's what a lot of families don't do. They kind of fluff over. They don't want to talk about the end. They don't want to talk about anything about it. And we have all talked about it. They know exactly. And we've always kept our loved ones at home to die, too. So they know, they've been there, and they know what to do, and they know how it's going to be. And a lot of families just do not want to touch it, and it's a shame. It's just a terrible block when it could be a building stone.
It seems like having done your homework kind of on the topic of your own death sets you free to focus on your life. I mean, I've got my death accounted for over here, and so I can now focus on how I want to make whatever time I have left really meaningful. So let's talk about aging in the sense of potentials.
Exactly. Well, now you're free to do things like, you know, I started the Senior Readers Theater at the Playhouse when I was, 74. I started Age to Perfection. People who wanted to be on stage, but they never had the courage, or they didn't want to spend 3 months rehearsing and all that, and they're now readers, and it's just such fun. And we perform at the Playhouse, and we go out into the community and perform. Some of them are selfies that Anne-Marie helped us to write. Some are old radio shows. It's just, it's wonderful. And
but everything that you're saying feels to me like, well, let me backtrack. when I was reading the articles about aging, I came across this one, 5 spiritual practices of aging well, and they were gratitude, generosity, reframing, curiosity, and flexibility. And it seems to me that you are constantly reframing.
Tell me what that means, because when I read your list, I love the list, but I need to know more about what it means to reframe.
Well, you explore something you haven't explored before. What is it you want to do that you haven't ever done before? And can you do it? And can you get some help to do it? And sure you can. And volunteer somewhere. Don't sit home and watch television and eat stuff you shouldn't have. Go to the gym and start walking and get together with friends and find something exciting. Like, there's so many places to volunteer in this wonderful place. And if you've always wanted to be on a boat and sail away, we've got the boats, and they'll train you. They'll train you at Hospice House. They'll train you at the theater, how to do will call, and you get a free ticket to the show. There's so many things. Just
what do you think holds people back? Now,
Yeah.
I mean, all three of us are pretty active and pretty involved. What holds people back from being more engaged in the community?
Maybe they're just content to sit,
Do you
and
think
they
so?
haven't even ever thought about stepping out.
Okay.
I think that's what they do.
But are they depressed, or aren't they? Are they content?
No,
If they're
I think
content in sitting,
they're
then
content, but there's so much more that they could do. It would be sad.
I think the reframing is difficult because people resist change, and if they don't have models, and if they don't have
that's true.
if they don't have like someone like you who's a powerhouse and just insists that life is going to carry on and it's going to be exciting, I think that's difficult for people. And I think, like, when I watched my parents in their final years watching an awful lot of television, part of it was because my mother was confined, but it was also a sort of resignation that
Like a
took
default
over.
choice?
Yeah, a sort of resignation. But the one thing that could get them out was their church, their activities, because that was something where they'd always been a leader. So part of the thing, when that pattern would break, it would be almost always for church. Yeah.
And they have you, and you could encourage them to write about their life for their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I do that, so.
Yeah. That is a big part of it, is what's your legacy, what's the stories that you have that nobody else has. I think that's a big part of it.
And in today's world, they don't have baby books anymore, or parents don't do them. They do, the pictures and put them online.
Photos.
So I have made baby books for all my grandchildren and great-grandchildren with pictures, and their parents send me what they're doing right now. She started crawling, and I've made baby books, and I take one of my great-grandson's baby books with me when I visit him every year, and it's the book of Daniel, and so he and I go through the book from his birth to now, and what Mommy says and what Daddy's doing, and his family history, and then I take it home with me to continue it. But he loves when I go visit, and we read the book of Daniel.
I'm curious to know how you came upon this attitude toward aging, because it seems quite different than many aging adults have. This sense of possibility, it's not over yet, there's a lot I can do. I was listening to an NPR program, On Point is on every evening, and it said the topic was going to be aging, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to listen because we're doing this interview. The people were talking about aging from age 20 to 40. I don't think I can learn very much here, because this is, but that whole notion of what is aging in our attitudes toward aging in the external community would, how did you get
how did
to be
this,
you?
how did you get to
happen?
be you? How do you, and I know you lead a lot of other people to this attitude.
I don't know what
Did
I
your
did.
parents have
My
a
parents
vital
were
attitude?
always very encouraging. They had many interests. I've always, I guess, been an optimist, and I know there's more out there. What can I do next? And yet stick with what I've been doing because it works.
Yeah. I think you have, I'm just going to feed back to you what I've observed over the years, because we've known each other a long time. And I think that one of those other elements is you have a curiosity. I think that innate curiosity is, I don't know if that's a genetic thing or if that's something that we grow into from teachers.
List.
Right.
That's one
but
of
you
my
are,
lists, too.
you're curious about the world, and and I think that is one of the antidotes to the sort of stalemate of aging, that we actively choose to ask those questions, to be curious about something.
Yeah, that was one of the things I would recommend to people who are just sitting on the couch all the time. What are you curious about? Is there anything you want to try next? How about cleaning out all those treasures you have and donating them or giving them? I give them to my children and grandchildren for Christmas. They're my parents' stuff that I still have, not much anymore, and I wrap it up and I give it to them for Christmas. And it's just...
Are there people, though, who when you say, what are you curious about, or what do you want to know or do that you haven't, other people just say, not so much?
Well, just think about it for a while. What didn't you get to do when you were 50 and that you might want to try right now?
And that you could still do?
And you can still do it. By the way, did we mention ages here?
We didn't say our ages, but we can. I'm perfectly willing. I'm 66.
Well, I would admit to entering my 7th decade.
All right. And in 5 months, I'm going to be 80.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah. What
Here we
happened?
are.
But that goes back to your question. Instead of saying, what have I lost? You're saying, what do I have and what can I still do? That whole idea of what, I mean, that's what I'm hearing over and over again is what can I still do? What can I...
Exactly. I'm not dead yet.
And I have to say, I have quite a few women friends who are in their 80s. And when I crossed over into 70, I thought, oh, that's young compared to these really vital women. And one woman that I know quite well was really apprehensive about becoming 80. Somehow it just was such a big number. And now, a year later, she says it's been the best year of her life.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Do you know what she attributes that to?
A whole bunch of things have come to fruition. Programs that she's started have taken on a much larger profile. She's received some recognition for her work. I just see her as that leaving a legacy. She now has a glimpse of what that might look like. She's worked hard to achieve it, but it's not over yet.
Yeah, that's right.
So is that a big part of the aging thing too? Is the idea that there is a legacy that I can leave that only I can leave?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
To make it, people want to think they made a difference.
They do.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and they're an example for their children and grandchildren too. You know, so.
Yeah, the model. I think having models, active models, is a really beautiful part of this whole thing.
What about wisdom? You had a great question in here. Does age bring wisdom? And then what do we mean by that? And I decided to text my daughter this morning, last minute. Do you think we're talking about aging? Do I have any wisdom? and she texted back, yes, a bunch. That's all I got. So I need to follow up with her and see what that means.
I think we have our own wisdom. Hopefully, we absorb things and change. We're not rigid. We can still change. But I don't know as we can give our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren wisdom, because they have to go through their own adventures in life, their lessons in life, disappointments, good things, but that will be their wisdom.
You know, I think that's a really
So
interesting...
we can't transmit it.
No.
That's interesting.
Well, you know, I think that's what I'm hearing, is we can't, it's not as... There's this mythology that with age you get wisdom, and it infers that you're going to disseminate that somehow.
Yeah, right.
And I think that is just absurd. I think what you said is so true, that wisdom is really about, it's almost a private awareness of how you've learned your life. and that what you said about it's for you
But I'm
more
always,
than for the world.
I'm looking for models, though. I mean, I do look for models of people who are aging beautifully, not necessarily gracefully. That's not the only goal, but I do look for wisdom, and I certainly look for models of people who are negotiating this difficult terrain with dignity and grace and wisdom.
Yeah.
I do look.
Yeah. In the aging process, one of the challenges I think that occurs over and over is that if you are partnered or if you are in a situation where you end up caretaking, that suddenly you may be able, your partner or the person you're caring for may not be abled. And one of the things that I personally worry about is how then do you keep that, if you are tied to the caregiving situation and out of both love and moral obligation, how then do you keep these positive attitudes going? How do you...
And your activities going.
Yeah, and this, keep, because that's really hard work and can be very despairing. Do you have ideas about that,
Well,
or
when
in your
Dan
work?
was dying with Parkinson's and had a stroke, he was still able to walk, and I would put him in the car with me, and I'd take him places, and if I had to go in and do an intake on a client, he would sit in the car, and he was very content just to be, we were just to be together. And then I made sure that I had caregivers come in. Wednesday was my day, and a caregiver would come in, then I would go to the grocery store, I'd get my hair cut, I'd work out, I'd just do all the things I needed to do and have some alone time and know that he was cared for with love. And I should have gotten more care caregivers in.
That's
More than one day.
Yeah, because but you want to be with them, and so it worked out really well. And K-Beth, my daughter, was there with him too sometimes. And sometimes he'd fall, and I'd call K-Beth at 6 in the morning and say, can you come over and help me get Danta up? And I'd scoot him down to the stairs on the floor, and then the railing would be there, and we could get him up. We also did have a life alert thing, but yeah. So getting family to help is
taking care of
good,
yourself.
and
And
taking
what
care
I'm
of
hearing
yourself.
there, you're caring for yourself.
I would go and have a massage, and especially, now that he's gone and we were always hugging and loving each other, I miss that touch, and so I go where people are great huggers, and the theater is a great place. Theater is a great place, and I go get a facial and I get a massage, so somebody is touching me, and I think that's really important.
That's an insight I hadn't thought about. That's really interesting, that as you age, because people don't always continue to touch you.
Yeah.
There's your body changes, you lose that youthful beauty, but you still, it's equally as important as it's ever been.
I'm probably more important. And a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, who I took care of her parents for 7 years, she did some reading and research, and last time we were together and we were hugging, and she said, 20 seconds, 20 seconds, just hold me for 20 seconds. And I did, and she did, and it was so powerful.
Wow.
And so I do that with a lot of people. I'll just say 20 seconds, and they know, and we'll hold each other.
Yeah.
So holding even more than touching.
Yeah.
It's
very very special.
We don't think about that.
No,
we just don't think about that.
Well, now you
process.
will.
Yeah, I will, absolutely.
Well, I was thinking as I was driving here this morning, listening to a romantic song on the radio, singing along, remembering things about my past romantic experiences, that inside me is that 30-year-old or that 20-year-old is still alive.
Right.
And still just as hungry for all of that. And I think most people don't think about that. They think that you're having old, more dignified thoughts all the time. But you know, there is that younger yearning self still in there that I rather like revisiting sometimes.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things that I learned as I've been caring for my mother, she's in a home, but is they bring in music from their era, like 40s and 50s music, and they just react. Even my mother, who's almost nonverbal, reacts with such joy at that memory, at that resurgence of feeling that comes with music. I think that's a big part of it.
It is. It's so meaningful.
And I found out through some research that music, when a person has Alzheimer's, dementia,
That's right.
and they can't communicate, if you sing to them, "Do you want to have a sandwich?" they'll understand it. You make a song out of what you want them to reply to. Yes.
Really?
Yeah, and we had a dear Alzheimer's lady, and we would sing to her all the time, and she would kind of come back, and just for that brief time.
Yeah.
But it was it was wonderful.
Wow.
So
We're really blessed in the sense that we know a lot more about how to care for ourselves as aging human beings and for others.
Right.
I mean, we know a lot more than we did even 10 or 20 years ago. I don't know, how are we doing on time?
Well, I think this has been just remarkable. I love where we've landed with this idea of holding and singing and these moments of curiosity. This feels to me like a true reframing in terms of being positive about this process that leads to, and this is the other takeaway for me, is this leads to what you call this next miracle.
It is.
Which I think is remarkable.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. It's been
coming
wonderful.
On. Just a joyous thing to talk about aging.
I know. You've made it.
Laughter.
You've taken away the fear.
There is no fear.
Thank you. And we'll be right back with Ideas Live. Welcome back to Ideas Live. I'm Anne-Marie Oomen. This is my co-host,
Karen Anderson.
And we have just completed a beautiful interview with Barbara Goodearl on the topic of aging. And boy, that was an interesting, I mean, I feel invigorated.
I do too. You know? I do. Take it on.
Right.
I know.
Okay.
She's such a model of what she talks about.
She is a model. I feel myself looking to her, looking to those attitudes. I was particularly impressed with this idea of when you are in, as many of us will be or are, a caretaking situation as you age, the requirement for self-care. It felt to me, she didn't use these words directly, but it felt to me like that whole idea of being surrounded by or surrounding yourself with, as much as possible, a team that can help you continue to embrace your own life and your own aging as you care for someone. That feels very true, because I think
it's hard, though.
Yes, I think that's the hardest thing, because we don't want to be a burden.
Right.
That's the other thing. You know, the contradiction is, let us not be a burden to anybody. Well, maybe that's part of the whole journey and love and being with the world. Is asking for that, you know. Certainly another thing that she inferred, but we didn't talk very much about, is a sense of that humility, and I mean true humility, that comes with aging, where you've really come up against your limitations and in some ways had to figure out how to really celebrate them and work around them.
And then another piece of it too, a friend I have who has turned 80 recently, I said, another way to look at it is it's a privilege to reach 80.
Yes. Yeah.
And she says, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, the sense of it's a gift to get old.
Yes, that's right. And to have the time to even reflect and think and adjust and I think also to thank people. You know, to thank those around you who, I mean, gratitude was one of those things that was on that list. And I think having gratitude for not just the life you've had, but for this time and this moment that you're in
Yeah,
you know,
even for right now.
for right now,
Yeah.
exactly. You know,
share this.
Barbara, bless her, left this beautiful
Meditation?
meditation. I think it's a kind of poem. It's titled "I Cherish My Aging Years," and she said that I could read it, and I'd love to share it with our audience. And it goes like this: I cherish my aging years because I know I will be reunited with those I love, because I am still a growing, vital person, because I am still discovering and learning, because I am finding who I truly am deep down inside, because I am loved, because I still have gifts and love to give, because there are those who still need me, because I'm not dead yet. And there's
That's
her
wonderful.
humor, that beautiful
Yes.
wit that she brings to the whole process.
Wow.
Yeah, it is really, it's about that positive attitude and honoring where we really are, you know, without denying it and being afraid.
Thank you for bringing her to the table. It was
Well,
really wonderful.
thank you all for being with us. And we'll be back next month for more of Ideas Live.